Always CNFers, the front runner strides into fall, and I have 3 events in September. Tomorrow, September 20th, depending on when you listen to this podcast, I'll be at the Coos Bay Public Library for an author talk at 2 p.m. September 21st, this Sunday, I will be in Portland in conversation at the Oregon Historical Society at 2 p.m. And on September 27th, I will be a featured author alongside Ruby McConnell for the Florence Festival of Books in Florence. It's all day, but the conversation is at 4:30. I have a total of 4 little things lined up in Idaho the first week of October, but I'll clue you into those as we get closer to those days. So stay clued in to my newsletters and BrendanO'Mara.com. Hey, secondarily on Instagram at Creative Nonfiction Podcast. Oh, yes, call for submissions. We got a new audio magazine. It's called Codes. That's the theme, not the magazine. The audio magazine is just the audio magazine. The Mandalorian and his kind live by a simple code, always punctuated by saying, this is the way. What codes do you live by? What codes were you at one time or another told to live by? Has a code led you down the right path or the wrong? Essays should be no longer than 2,000 words. A 15-minute read. Bear in mind that in the end, these are audio essays. Write accordingly. Email submissions with codes in the subject line to creativenonfictionpodcast@gmail.com. Original, previously unpublished work only, please. Deadline's October 31st, 2025. There are no submissions, so this might be dead in the water audio magazine. Cash on the line from the O'Mara grant, so send me your best fully formed pieces and maybe consider becoming a patron to help put money in the coffers, that helps put money in the pockets of writers. Patreon.com/CNFpod. Let's move it along. Let's move this along.
I've had books where I haven't been able to write for months, and I've had to learn that it's not about that. It's about the showing up, and it's about the coming back.
CNFers, it's the Creative Nonfiction Podcast, a show where I speak primarily to writers about the art and craft of telling true stories. I'm Brendan O'Mara. Are we doing this? Are we doing it? Are you still somehow doing it? So am I. So am I, man. Today we have Jeff Chang, and what a great conversation this was. Really fun. He's the author of the Beefy Biography, Water, Mirror, Echo, Bruce Lee, and the Making of Asian America. It's published by Mariner Books, so we share a publisher here. Pretty cool. You figure you got my book, Jeff's book here, and Jeff Pearlman's book on Tupac coming out in October. All by Mariner, all iconic men who died too young. Pearlman will visit in October. But for now, we're here to talk about Jeff Chang. He's also the author of Can't Stop, Won't Stop, A History of the Hip-Hop Generation, which was the winner of the American Book Award. Who We Be, A Cultural History of Race in Post-Civil Rights America, and We Gon' Be Alright, Notes on Race and Resegregation. That gives you just a little taste, okay? Show notes to this episode and more at BrendanO'Mara.com. Hey, there, you can peruse hot blogs, tasteful nudes, and sign up for my 2, very important newsletters, the flagship Rage Against the Algorithm, and Pitch Club, issue 4 of Pitch Club. This with Cassidy Randall, dropped like it was hot. And boy, was it. And I'm working on the next one with the journalist Justin Heckert. It's pretty great. Would love for Pitch Club to catch fire. I might be buying some ad space in the Sunday Long Read newsletter for it. I mean, talk about a targeted audience of people who love long form, who love writing long form, and maybe you can learn a thing or two about some of the best people doing it and how they sell their pieces. Let's keep doing it. We might be throwing in book pitches, Asian pitches, maybe my Prefontaine book proposal that I will audio annotate. I don't know. Or maybe my next book proposal if it sells. When it sells, it'll sell, right? It has to sell. Yeah, it's gonna. Pitch Club will never cost a dime. I'll never gatekeep that. All I ask is for your permission because platform is currency. It's the most important thing. I mean, I guess writing is the most important thing, but then it's like very closely, it's your platform. And ideally not social media. But it's just a wing of it. I'm getting off track here. Both are first of the month. No spam. So far as I can tell, you can't beat them. Also, I hosted my first Patreon AMA last week. How'd it go? Not great. Gonna nix it. I think so. One person showed. Thank you, Kate. And it was kind of awkward because I'm on video. but the guests are in a like type chat thing. So only Kate showed up, which is cool. Awesome. Thank you. So I answered a couple of her questions. But it was bizarre and disorienting. Like I'm having conversation into the camera, and then she's just like typing things. So it's just it would work if there were several people involved. If I do such a thing in the future, I might just do it on Zoom and share a Zoom link. So if only one person shows up, we can at least talk. Anyway, it was bizarre. We can all agree it was. If you care to support the podcast with a few dollar bills, go to patreon.com/CNFpod. Oh my God. You gotta. The housekeeping things. They take forever, don't they? But my intros aren't that bad, right? So a little more about Jeff. He's a writer, host, cultural organizer, known for his work in culture, politics, the arts, and music. His work has appeared in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, The Guardian, LA Times, and The Believer, among many others. He has a great Substack at zentronics.substack.com, and you can follow him on Instagram at zentronics. You can learn more about Jeff at jeffchang.net. And we got a parting shot about gatekeeping. But for now, why don't you just settle in? We got a good one here, people. Cue up the montage.
Am I allowed to swear, by the way?
Oh, yes.
Oh, okay. Are you just fucking insane?
Just kind of a sloppy person.
No, I'm still such a fuck up. I'm going to be a fuck up probably for the rest of my life.
This is going to have to interest somebody somewhere other than me.
It's from Theodore Roosevelt. And it's just like with self-discipline, most anything is possible. And I think in writing, it can be very, self-discipline can be very challenging. And certainly, the book writing process, you do have to bring a degree of practice and discipline to it. And just for you and in your myriad projects, and certainly with an ambitious undertaking with any of the books you've done, and certainly your most recent, just what's the discipline by which you operate?
What a great question, Brendan. Like, yeah, and this is the kind of stuff you don't really get to talk about unless you're talking with other writers, or aspiring writers and that kind of thing. So I love this kind of discussion. So, for me, there were many, the book was signed many, many years ago, so long ago that I don't even want to go back and look at the contract. Because I was working for another publisher. I had books due to another publisher. I literally had like 3 books that were due to this other publisher before I could begin work on this one. And then life intervened and the world intervened, the George Floyd protests jumped off and the pandemic jumped off and all kinds of stuff happening to our communities, our Asian and Pacific Islander communities jumped off. And I wasn't able to get to the book until the last 3 years. But what I was able to do was to, let's put it this way, extricate from myself from a 9 to 5 and then get back to the regular pace of writing. Because for about 13 years or so, I was stealing writing time. I was working full-time jobs, and I would, work at 4 a.m. I'd get up every morning, maybe like a runner, or a martial artist for that matter. And just literally write for 2 hours every morning. And you get good stuff some days, and some days you're like, you don't want to leave. And then some days you're just like, I'm just staring at the screen. But that discipline, like you said, right? That thing of like, this is part of my routine now. It's like, I get up and eat breakfast. I get up and eat breakfast and write. And then I get in the car and drive. When I was finally able to, there were years literally where I wasn't able to pick the book back up. When I got back to it, it was like, again, like maybe like an athlete or a martial artist coming back to the practice, and the endorphins start running back, and you remember the joy that you had in it. Also the struggles of it,
For sure.
But you're back in it, and then I couldn't be stopped. I mean, I was lucky enough to be able to get a writer's residency with the LucasArts program at Montalvo Arts Center, and so that gave me 3 months like to be able to just dive in and be in it. Like if I wanted to be 20 hours a day, or if not, I could be there at least in it, 10 hours a day, but I wanted to be there. And yeah, and just the coming back to it every day, just getting the paces in, getting the work in, getting the words in.
Yeah, and hearing you talk about that and stealing those hours, it's always great to talk about that, because there are so many people out there who might feel shame that maybe the writing that they're doing doesn't fully support them in like a financial way. And here are it's always great hearing, professional writers and accomplished writers from across the publishing spectrum that it's like, yeah, I write it in the nooks and crannies of the day job and stuff like that. So to hear you articulate that is really, I think, validating for a lot of people who listen to this show.
It's really real. I mean, for many years, I was just writing whatever, record reviews that paid $25, and a lot of writing for free, of course, but I wasn't able to make a living on it until a little bit later in life, but just the practice of it and the coming back to it again, I look at some of these folks who have been just training for decades, and the thing of coming back to it, day after day, week after week, year after year, it all adds up, and you're heading in a direction. And I think that sometimes we're impatient for product. That's what the world demands of us in our day jobs and that kind of thing. And it's not a linear type of process, but you do get better. I can definitely say that it took me a very long time to find my writing voice, maybe because I was, stealing time or that kind of thing. And also just because, at the beginning, you don't know what you don't know. And then once you start knowing what you don't know, then you feel like you have a big hill to climb. But again, it's a step at a time. And it's one of those hills that you never reach the top of, actually.
Right.
Which is okay. Yeah.
Exactly. And you said two things that are really important. Just this idea of linearity, or in the case of many of us writers, this non-linear path through this work, and also finding your voice along that non-linear serpentine path. So just in that non-linearity, who were the voices you were ingesting that ultimately fed into what would become uniquely you?
That's such a great question too. So I read a lot of writers, like Mike Davis was huge for me. Angela Davis was huge for me. People like James Baldwin were huge to me. But also writers like, Maxine Hong Kingston, Frank Chin, writers who were developing an Asian American literary tradition. I came into this through music. So I came into this writing record reviews in my like high school newspaper, and then finding my way from that to like zines, music zines, and then finding my way from that into what became known as hip hop journalism. And so we were all reading each other all the time, so I was reading Joan Morgan and Dream Hampton, and the writer of all writers for us, for our generation, was Greg Tate, who just stylistically, in terms of knowledge and in terms of approach and just a fearlessness about writing in that particular climate, where he didn't care if people were gonna. If he came out today, it would be different. He'd be having to be subjected to all these silly comments, in the internet posts and whatnot. But he didn't care about that, and he forged a style and a way for all of us who came after to be able to follow. So Greg Tate was kind of, in a lot of ways, my beacon. And then when I'm starting to read people like Mike Davis and Angela Davis and Frantz Fanon and all of these other types of folks, like all of that is beginning to make sense. But I didn't really develop my voice, I wouldn't say, until about 10 years into the writing.
Yeah.
Writing from like teens well into, my late 20s, early 30s, until I'm like, oh, that sounds like the voice in my head when I see it on the page. and so I feel like I'm a late bloomer in a lot of ways.
Oh, big time. I totally
Yeah.
understand. That's and this culture has little patience for late blooming, and it puts
That's right.
such a premium on precocity. Those like the 30 writers under 30 that you need to
I
pay
was
attention
just going
to.
to say that. Yeah.
Those lists,
Yeah.
like that got into my head in a very bad way, when I was like 29, 30, 31, and it just totally like sapped so much of my energy. And it was just like, how do you even get on a list like that? Like, how do you even get noticed? I'm not getting noticed. Here I am. Like, you were writing reviews for a little bit of money. I was writing like these awful, not awful, but like these slideshows, like winners and losers from the Daytona 500 for Bleacher Report, all this shit. And like all my heroes aren't writing this stuff. And all these, meanwhile, these people are on this rocket ship, and I'm comparing myself to them, and it just felt awful. And it sounds like that's something you could totally relate to.
Totally. I was lucky enough to be able to break in. I say break in like with scare quotes big time, because we were kind of forging our own sort of little alternative world with all the hip hop zines and hip hop magazines and stuff like that. So, breaking in was meant like breaking into doing stuff for rap pages or magazine. I had a column, or alternative weeklies back then. And then later, then we're coming in and we're developing stuff for content farms. We're doing the record reviews go from like however long you wanted to write, and they would give you in the stapled copy of this zine that they were Xeroxing to 100 words, and I learned a lot out of that, and we can come back to that. But then you're like you're writing these $25 reviews for, or $50 reviews for 100 words that will be in the back of a magazine that you don't know if anybody will ever read, and you do that, and you feel like you're like. What I did learn from that though was compression and editing. And I got edited by, I was lucky enough to get edited by some of the best in the business, Danielle Smith, Sheena Lester, Bob Christgau, all of these folks. I was lucky enough to be able to work with and under, and especially Bob. Like Bob would be like ruthless. He'd be like, no, like you're at 75 words. We need to get to 72 words. You're going back through this like for the 90th time. And and that was great. And in fact, I give that exercise to anybody that I'm teaching, writing to, is, oh, great. You gave me a 500-word article. Like, now I need you to cut it in half. And then now I need you to cut it in half again.
Oh my God. Yeah.
And it's tough. It's really tough. But then you get down to the root of what it is that you're really trying to say. And you get to the most exact way, the precise way of being able to say it. It's sort of the writing equivalent of Bruce practicing Jeet Kune Do and getting rid of all of the fluff so you can just get to the most direct, counterattack or whatever you have to do.
Yeah. And the thing is, you need that fluff. You need to write up to 500 to then cut down.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's like you have to put fat on the body in order to then make it lean. It's in a way, it's like it'd be nice if you can just get right straight to the 75 great words. But I think you almost need the 500 to get to the 75.
Yeah. And you need to be kind with yourself a little bit about it too, right? Like, I think people do writer's block. We can talk about that, right? Writer's block a lot of times is just that fear of being able to put the word on the page because it might sound silly, or it doesn't, like meet your standards, whatever like high exacting standards you've had. And I've had books where I haven't been able to write for months, and I've had to learn that it's not about that. It's about the showing up, and it's about the coming back, and it's all in the edits anyways. Yeah. Like what's getting published is never going to be the first thing out of your mouth, or the first thing onto the page. It's probably going to be the 1,000th thing that you got onto the page, and that's where the perfection comes in, is the refinement process. So once I learned it was about that, and the compression exercises, and all of those kinds of things, it got a little bit easier to think about how to pace oneself, how to sort of unfold it over the long run.
Nice.
So,
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. And I was thinking a couple weeks ago how just uh, coming up like playing sports, for instance. Nowadays a lot of kids are very specialized in like a particular sport, and like when I was coming up, we would play by the season, and you maybe specialize late. And I think that like really kind of applies to like writing or even the arts, that maybe like this sort of multi disciplinary way to like maybe for us, we're nonfiction writers, but maybe it's like for a certain season maybe we just mess around with poetry or fiction or whatever, but then it makes the thing that we want to be known for, it makes it a little bit better, because we're not just wasting ourselves at the one well. And I don't know, just for you, how are you thinking about the holistic nature of what you bring to your art?
I think I've found that I do nonfiction the best, sort of narrative, long form nonfiction the best, but it didn't start that way necessarily. And even for me, like when I was coming up as a younger person, I was really into painting and drawing, and that was the art that I kind of really wanted to explore. And then I was kind of like beaten out of it by formal training, to be honest. It was the type of thing where actually taking classes in college with professors like made me actually really like dislike it and cast doubt on what I was doing. And I think that's about the time I really started picking up on writing. I was always doing like writing around music and stuff, but thinking a little bit more about how to move into other things. So there's that. And then the other part of it too is that particularly in the way that I'd like to write, which is sort of the way I describe it is sort of seeing the fish and the tank. There's a sort of famous psychological experiment that was done in which people were asked to look at a fish tank and to describe what they saw. And one group described the fish and all the color and the scales and how the fish are moving and that kind of stuff. And the other group, it broke very cleanly into these two groups. The other group was looking not just at the fish, but at the tank and, the rocks that were in there and the seaweed that they might have planted it in. Oh, there's some fish flakes, that are left there that they didn't eat or whatever. And I've always been the latter. I've been that kind of person. So in terms of my appetite for what I need to sort of ingest and metabolize to do my writing, it's all about like veering in all these different types of directions. And then it's about sort of mixing it together, hip hop style, it's sort of like you got all these different types of sounds. How are you going to make it into a beat? I got this loop, I got that horn stab, I got this guitar lick. These are in the same key. Oh, there's a nice little, vocal hook here, and then putting it together and stuff. So that's sort of how I kind of approach things. And it means like being a little bit more of a generalist. And I really, really admire those who are not generalists. I wish I could be a poet and be able to like really focus in on an idea and then distill it, into 17 syllables or whatever. And I can't, I'm not good at that. So now I've done a lot of different types of experiments in different forms. I've found that this is what I'm best at. And it means that for the next challenge, I'm going to have to really bite off something I haven't been able to chew very well yet. So
and there's there's a moment in the acknowledgments where your pal Viet, the brilliant writer, he said something like, "Assemble the scariest, toughest readers you know, and allow them to tear your shit all the way up." And and that is what a line and what a way to make your work better. But how did you just have the stomach to then give over your work to very good eyeballs to then tear it to shreds and still have the confidence to go on?
No, it's been an evolution, man. I mean, it's been the kind of thing where like like my hip hop crew from when I was really young is the Soul Size crew became Quantum. Folks like DJ Shadow, Black Alicious, and Lyrics Born, Gifted Gab, Latif the True Speaker, and also a good friend, Joseph Patel, who produced Summer of Soul and Sly Lives with Questlove. Powerful crew. And when they used to make beats with each other, they would hide the beats from each other. They would not like want to let people listen to it for a while till it was done. And then even after that, I think, and I, you know, and so I was like, you know, like, and then on the other hand, the hip hop journalism thing was the type of thing where it's like, okay, De La Soul's album's coming out this month, so everybody is going to be doing an article on De La Soul, and let's see who did the best one, type of thing, you know. So you read Vibe, you'd read Herb, you read Rap Ages, Rap Sheet, you know, all of them. You'd read all of the magazines, and you'd be like, who did the best article? It was like this sort of competition. So I was living between those two poles, and at the same time, when I started doing my writing, I was a little bit more protective of what I was doing. I felt like I really didn't want to lose control over it. I was like, oh, purist about it and everything, blah, 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 blah. And over time, you know, it became clear that the more that I was able to share it out, the better it was going to be. And I think that Viet's line that came from an interview that he did with another friend, Kathy Park Hong, who like, they were talking about the process because Viet had asked Kathy to do a reading of his book, A Man with Two Faces, and he dropped that, and I was shocked, and then I was like, oh my God, like, but how can I get better? That's the only way. You know what I mean? I have to be able to give it to people who are at that level who can really check me, and so I went back to my sort of like days when I was a hungry writer, and you know, having like realizing the point that at which I stopped fighting my editors. That's when I really started learning a lot. So luckily now I have a lot of friends and peers who are just amazing Pulitzer winners, and you know, and just geniuses in their fields. And for whatever reason, they said yes when I asked them to read. So yeah, I feel like the book's better, much better for that. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, that's yeah. It takes a lot of courage is a weird word to use, but it does take some degree of courage to be like, you know, this isn't up to the standard that I have in my head. But to be vulnerable, I guess, to be like, yeah, it's not that great. It's not that great yet, and now you can maybe you guys can help me do that.
Yeah, and having friends who are going to be generous enough to be spending, right, like dozens of hours, you know, maybe weeks with your I mean, because I don't do small so well, and then just be really, really brutally honest with you. That's how the crew ended up becoming. So, you know, with Soul Sides at the beginning, like the guys were hiding beats from each other. And then as they began to sort of feel more confident about their work and began to really love and trust each other, it was always like, this has got to go through the crew. And so that was the development that happened. And, you know, that was a stage of where the hip hop battle, that was still the big thing, you know, so freestyling was the thing, and to see folks cutting in competition with each other in the way that the old jazz artists used to do, in real time, right, with words, right, and knowing that as a writer I'll never match that. That was like how I began to write Can't Stop Won't Stop back in the day. So yeah, so my standard was like literally like Gift the Gab, Latif the True Speaker, Lyrics Born in a room, going at each other in real time as Shadow or Excel are dropping the beats, and you know, in real time on beat, and them like taking each other's heads off and going, I will never be able to match that. But that's a great standard to try to aspire to in writing, to see if you can keep people's attention and continue to surprise them, you know, page after page.
Yeah, and when you're starting to tackle, you know, biography and this degree of, you know, ambitious storytelling that is, you know, talking about someone who's been written about a lot and trying to find those new angles and engender trust from people close to him, you know, what was, you know, step one for you? It's a big onion to peel, but what was step one as you were embarking on, you know, its many iterations over the years?
to kind of quietly and humbly begin to collect the information and to do a lot of watching, and listening. And so, step by step, kind of moving into that world, then you develop relationships and you develop trust with people, and you begin to understand um, how people not just how people tell the story, but how people are invested in the story, and how and what your responsibility is to the story. Like that begins to take shape, very early on. It takes shape very slowly, but it takes shape very early on. But yeah, so sort of that kind of inching towards the cipher, to use another hip hop metaphor, and then understanding it and learning the norms, learning the language, learning the folks in it, learning the relationships then, and then building those relationships as well. So yeah, so it's in that way, it's a good thing that the book took so long to do, because I can now like say that there is like, I feel really good about what I put on the page now. And I feel really good about the world that I tried to recreate. And I feel really good about also my responsibility. Well, I feel like I'm on top of the responsibilities that I owe to the people that helped to get me there. And that's something that's really important to me, just maybe coming from the, Chinese and Kanaka Maoli Native Hawaiian background that I come from. It's important to be able to understand the kuleana that I have when I'm putting something out there. This is the Lee's story. It's the Lee family's story. Doesn't mean that other people didn't have other perspectives and don't have other perspectives, and that there are not other ways to be able to tell the story, but it's their husband, father, who is no longer here with us. For all the rest of us, it's entertainment. It's a really important thing to be able to keep at the front of my mind, in terms of thinking about what the story does in the world.
Yeah, and I believe your friend said he was echoing someone else, I believe, but he was like, a biography may be for the world, he said, but there are people for whom the story is their life. So
that's Bao Nguyen, who did the Be Water documentary. And yeah, absolutely, 2000%. Bao's got the wisdom of the sages, and to hear that, from him as he was putting that together, it just meant a lot. It really grounded me and centered me for what I needed to do.
And with, given that, Bruce Lee's story has been told a lot over the decades, and I'm sure, the family, Linda, and then, Shannon, who's like, the daughter of Bruce and Linda, a lot of people over the years knock on their door. And I was surprised that you had, their blessing and access with them, just because doing unauthorized biography, it's sometimes very hard to get that access to those people who have given so much of themselves over the decades that they might just be exhausted by it, or they might feel exploited. I guess getting to that part, how did you engender that trust with them, where you had wonderful access that helped you tell a very rich story?
I mean, I don't know why they said yes. You'd have to ask them. But what I can say is that they entrusted me, and I take that trust seriously. That doesn't necessarily mean that everything I write is. It certainly doesn't mean that everything I write is vetted by them. In fact, nothing was.
Right.
Like they were like, "You go and do what you're going to do with this," and I did give them a draft, to be able to look at. I gave Shannon a draft to be able to look at, and and she didn't necessarily agree with everything that I wrote, and that's fine. But she also was like open-hearted and generous enough to be able to say, okay, that's you, and we're still friends. Like the friendship is still there. It's still deep, and that's how it is. Like if you like, the best of your friendships, you don't necessarily see eye to eye on everything, including some of maybe what may be the most important things to you. But they're still your friends. They're still whatever your family, So that was what I was going for. But there's no linear path, and you just have to show up, and you have to be good to your word, and you have to deliver the things that you say you're going to deliver when you say you're going to deliver them if they ask you. I'm not saying that this is transactional that kind of way. I'm just saying that that's the way you build trust.
Yeah.
It wasn't transactional at all. And again, at the end of the day, like Shannon would absolutely tell me, no, like I don't see it that way. But both of those things can be true. Like the book can say this, and her truth can stand, and both of those things can be true.
Yeah, it's I know in talking with my editor, about Steve Prefontaine, he would always say, it's, at some point you need to, you have your finger on the scale of this story. You have to make those
as the writer. Yeah,
as the writer, you have to bring your point of view and your assertions to it. So for you, what were some of those assertions that you were bringing, even if maybe they came into conflict with Shannon?
Well, I will say this, like the story is about Bruce as an Asian American. And that's, I think, from the beginning where everybody was seeing eye to eye on this. There's ways in which Bruce has been interpreted as an American. There's stories that have been written about him in which he's been interpreted as an Asian. But I really think it's this position of him being an Asian American that really explains who he was the best. And so that's the story that I was trying to tell. And I think that we all saw that, Bao saw that, Shannon saw that, I saw that, all of our other friends that were so crucial to this process saw that as well. Kamal, my good friend Kamal Bell, all of these folks were crucial for me being able to move forward and putting this book together and out in the world. I think that I've made a pretty good case in the book about that.
In any great biography, there's an element of world building, and it's kind of like the fish tank. You're describing some of the fish tank that helps inform the people living within it and swimming within it. So I think, by you taking that scope, that's exactly, what that's part of the framework that you're working with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 2000%. That's sort of the analytic lens that I bring to it, so to speak, as well as like the experiential lens. I'm reading Bruce's story about how he's born in San Francisco, and then he goes back with his parents as a baby, and then he comes back to the U.S., immigrates back to the U.S. at the age, of 18. And I'm like, that's my grandfather's story, actually. Mm. My grandfather was born in Hanalei, Kauai, and his parents took him back to China, but he remigrated at the age of 17. And I'm like, well, actually, that's not just my grandfather's story. It's the story of a lot of Asian Americans. This idea that we migrate and we live, across the Pacific and in between the Pacific, right? We're in all of these worlds all at once. And for folks to be like, well, he was more Asian or more American. No, he was Asian plus American all the time. And I think that is the way to maybe watch his movies, in Way of the Dragon. He's telling an immigrant story. He worked in a restaurant in Seattle as well. And that informed like the way that he was telling the story of the waiters in this Italian town, right? In this Italian city who are about to get, their restaurant poached by a gentrifying developer who's also a gangster. Like, it's not like he didn't see that stuff happening in Seattle when he was living there. So, these are a lot of the things that I think don't pop out when you think of Bruce just as Asian, just as, an assimilated American. No, it's he's actually living like in between and all through all of those worlds.
Yeah, and you're right that you were looking for a portrait of Bruce and Asian America that feels materially and and materially and psychologically true, and this third wave of Bruce Lee scholarship. So how would you define the third wave? I mean, maybe even the first ones, but then certainly the third, that of which you are on the leading edge.
Yeah, I'm part of the generation that comes of age after Bruce. So the first generation, I think of, there's been a lot. Let me back up and just say there've been a lot of folks who have copiously and carefully documented Bruce's life for this like two generations of scholars, and maybe now I'm part of the third. But the first generation were his contemporaries and friends and people that he knew, who were capturing a lot of the stuff that he did, at the time in real time. People like Mito Uehara, who was writing about him for Black Belt magazine, I think key among them, and and a whole bunch of other folks who would relate a lot of those stories in writings or in recordings and those kinds of things. The second generation of folks came of age after he passed away in the 70s, and they continue to document these stories and to seek out all the people who Bruce had known and had worked with, largely the fighters, much less so, I think, the people who knew him in his sort of non-martial arts context. But that's a lot of the amazing work that's been going on and continues to go on. And I come in after that. I between the time I got the contract and the time I was able to start writing, many people passed away. And I know that was probably a thing with you too, writing about, Steve. And I just think, I regret that every day.
Yeah.
Thanks to the second generation and the first generation of documentarians, we have a huge record to draw upon from. And so my job was to piece it together and make sense of it, to line it up on a timeline, first of all, and then to go back to the folks who are still around and to ask them some of the questions maybe they'd never been asked before, to try to get into the interstices of what the record currently is and can still yield at this particular point. So I was really lucky to be able to make the acquaintance of people like Mito Uehara, his first girlfriend Amy Sambo, a lot of his friends in Seattle who were there when he first arrived and who helped him through his early years, which is where I think he became the great hero that he became, because he moved in that space from being sort of a privileged child growing up in Hong Kong to being able to understand what it meant to be a racialized minority in the U.S. and learning from poor white folks, learning from black folks, learning from Japanese American folks in particular. That was what began to shape him to become the hero of the global sort of underdog, the the sort of voice of the people in a way, which is why he's so popular now today, in comparison to all the other folks he was coming up with at the same time, all the other movie actors he thought that he was wanting to be. Like Steve McQueen or Jim Coburn or those types of folks.
Yeah. Well, and also taking on a subject like this, also you're dealing with, legends and myth making, and often trying to get behind that mythology of decades of stuff that's been fed our way. And, you're right, sometimes allowed myth and legend to take up where fact should be. And then a little bit later on in the book, there was like they make the man into a legend above time and place, as if his success had always been preordained. They make him transcendent, but also unknowable. And I really love those passages about how you're echoing and trying to get beyond mythology. And, how were you able to accomplish that so we feel a more intimate portrait of him?
I was just struck about how little people actually knew about Bruce's life.
Mm-hmm.
And still, don't. And I tie it like right away to how little, people know of Asian America in many respects. And so, telling those two stories, the story of the rise of Asian America and the story of the rise of Bruce Lee, is in some ways my attempt to try to shed some light on these, parts of memory and history that have been less seen, and then to be able to allow people to see Bruce in his fullness. Because when we do, then we can realize, oh wow, like that's the real scale of his accomplishment. You mean he went to Hollywood and there was literally no Asian in Hollywood who could play a hero since the 1920s? Wow, it's sort of, when you put it in that kind of context, it just the scale of his accomplishment just becomes that much clearer. It's so much bigger.
Yeah, he really, he just, probably midway through the book when he's starting to move into Hollywood, and there was the number one son, and certainly when he's starting to embody Kato for Green Hornet, it's just like of trying to get beyond this caricature, and he's so instrumental towards getting beyond the stereotypes and these harmful stereotypes, and to put Asian America in a way that's at least, as at one point you're right, starting to decentralize whiteness.
Mm-hmm. It's not a new thing for me to say this at all either. But when I went back and I started looking at some of the roles that he was playing, even after the Green Hornet, it was like, wow, the straitjacket that Asian Americans were in terms of what Hollywood's expectations were. The other artists who I got to speak to, who is like a contemporary of Bruce's, and who we can kind of think of as breaking through these boxes, was George Takei, right?
Yeah.
Who is now sort of like, he's like our James Earl Jones, he's the voice of God, the Asian American voice of God. But he was also, at the same time that Bruce is playing Kato, playing Sulu, and so you start seeing these breaks in the fabric of what is limiting, what is sort of holding down or suppressing the range of representations that Asian Americans can have. And then the fact that it takes like another 20 years to get through another breakthrough, that we need to wait another 20 years till Joy Luck Club comes out, and Bruce's son Brandon, is able to make Rapid Fire and The Crow, that it take and Dragon comes out. Like, it takes another 20 years for that. And then it takes another 20 years after that to get to Everything Everywhere All at Once, and Crazy Rich Asians, and Past Lives, and all these other amazing movies that have kind of come out of this sort of post-pandemic Asian American Renaissance. So to think about like the long arcs of history is to kind of, again, sort of see the scale of the achievement that he was able to accomplish in just 32 years.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's I always love the grace notes in a book like this that show some vulnerability. Like Bruce Offa, he was very tough. On the streets, he would seek out these fights and often win fights. But then there's this moment where, when girls flirted with him, he suddenly got very shy and awkward, and then he would just invite them to feel his muscles. And it's just like, it was like little things like that. You realize, like, okay, there is the kind of a shy kid beneath all that veneer.
Yeah. Painfully shy kid. The vulnerabilities were the most surprising thing to me. Like to like, we see him as this invincible hero, and he's crushing all evil, villains who come after him and stuff, in numbers and in size, right? And then just to know that at the same time, like, he had to hype himself up. Like, he's literally reading all of these like Chinese, 4-character idioms to like give himself like ways to be able to wake up in the morning and deal with the world. And then he gets a little older and he's in Seattle and he's reading like these self-help books,
Yeah.
He's reading these American self-help books, and Napoleon Hill, like Think and Grow Rich. Like, he's broke, but if he thinks it, if he keeps his mind focused on this, one true aim, that he'll be able to open up all these kung fu schools. And just like thinking about it in that way, I think other writers in the past have been like, oh, it was preordained. He always knew exactly what he was going to do. But when you start looking at some of the Chinese translations and you look at some of his private papers, you're like, man, this guy was like really trying to keep it together at certain points. Again, to understand that, to like get at that sort of that sort of psychological nuance, like through these papers, was not only, it was a gift to me as a writer, but it's something that is a gift to all of us as folks who might be fans of Bruce, to know, hey, this guy went through just the same kinds of stuff that we did. He had to put his pants on one leg at a time as well, right?
Yeah.
Maybe he didn't. Maybe he jumped into his pants. I don't know, but still, right? He had to learn how to do that at some point if he did. So,
well, I think it gets a bit of ahead in the chronology, but later in the book, where he had a lot of his peers, and even Linda was telling him, like, you don't have to, try so hard right now. Like, you're established. But it kind of gets to that insecurity of like, it could all go away at once if he doesn't just keep pressing as hard as he possibly can. And it's just right to the very end of his short life, he was really, pedal to the metal.
He was pedal to the metal, and he felt an amazing and incredible burden and responsibility to be able to represent Asians in America and Asians all around the world in the best light. And so that is really the tenor and the tone of a lot of the struggles that he undergoes in the last year of his life. Is literally every fight that he's fighting, he feels like is a life and death type of fight. And you just, again, like, if I could tell you, like, reading some of these notes, like when later scholars such as John Little and other, great documentarians of Bruce Lee's life put these things onto paper and they get translated into a font, you don't get a sense of how they feel on the page. And some of these letters, he's literally, like, you could tell he's writing this late at night. He's completely exhausted. There's literally one line that he writes, like, something like, this is what I was supposed to do, or something like that. And the line just kind of trails off the page.
Yeah.
That again, sort of just, like I'm just thinking about, like, now, like, being able to even just write this book and be recognized as, a writer of Chinese and Native Hawaiian descent, like Bruce made that possible in his way, right? He made that possible. He made it possible for us to be able to do what we're doing now. So when I take a deep breath and I sigh like that, it's, and many of us still feel that kind of a weight. Other folks are not. The younger folks maybe don't feel it as much, and God bless them, because they're going to do all kinds of incredible stuff.
Yeah.
But I certainly still feel that as well. And that was part of what I was trying to convey, I guess.
Yeah. Well, even right towards the very end, and this is something that kind of echoed how even like good old Steve Prefontaine was viewing his athleticism and activism. You write of Bruce, like, he used his hands to help and hold others. He used his hands to form fists and fight for justice. And there was just this element of, it was so much more than what was on the surface. And, we're talking about it now, but it's just like, he had the self-awareness to know that he was more than himself. He was, he had the burden of trying to elevate, his people.
Yeah, it's just like Steve, right? He could have just been a great runner. He could have just been like one of the most competitive runners of all time, but he also felt the need to be able to take on the AAU on behalf of all other amateur athletes, and that resonates all the way to today, right? And even the debates that we have about the NCAA sports and on and on. It's just like, it's really interesting to kind of look back at this particular period and to look at people like Bruce and Steve as like incepting these ideas that literally take, half a century to actually to sort of, come to maturation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, big time. Yeah.
It's powerful.
Yeah. You're right. Far more important question loomed, like, against the backdrop of the struggle for racial desegregation, how might Asians rise from a self-defensive crouch to a new standing in America? And that was like really his animating force.
Yeah, it was. And so the fact is that Bruce never called himself an Asian American. He didn't have access to the movement. He was in a different world completely. And then he was back in Asia as the Asian American movement is making big strides and sort of, taking hold in communities all across the country. So he didn't have access to that language, but it was the same type of spirit that was motivating him, to break through in Hollywood, that was motivating activists, organizers, teachers, health workers, lawyers, artists in Asian communities across the U.S. in the late 60s and the early 70s to be seen and to be recognized and to, claim the civil rights that they, were being denied.
Yeah, and part of the book too that I really loved was when Jesse Glover comes into the picture, and
Oh yeah.
he's just someone who knew of Bruce, wanted to learn from him, and Bruce had a choice of whether to help manifest Jesse's vision for or just to be in and among these martial artists, and Bruce does take him under his tutelage. So I don't know, just, for those who aren't familiar, but like, who's Jesse Glover and why is that moment so formative?
Jesse Glover was really his first formal student. And Jesse Glover was a young black man who had grown up in the same district that Bruce was within, segregated within the Central District in Seattle. And he had grown up as a 12-year-old, literally being attacked by drunken police just for being on the street with his two friends in the wrong part of Seattle at the wrong part of the day. And so, which is, daylight, it's the afternoon, but he's there in a primarily white area, and this policeman swaggers out of the restaurant, and suddenly they're being chased by this cop, and he gets himself beaten, bloody, to the point where his jaw is broken. And he never forgets this incident. And so through his life, he's trying to learn self-defense in order to protect himself. And at one point, for a long time, he's thinking, I want to get revenge on these cops. By the time he meets Bruce, he's decided that it's not a mission that he wants to engage in, that he can't live in that place, that it's hurting him more in some ways in terms of how he wants to move on, but he's still obsessed with martial arts. So he sees Bruce, who's like this 19-year-old, doing a demonstration in Chinatown for the Mid-Autumn Festival of Kung Fu. And he's like, that's what I want to learn. And finds out that Bruce is attending the same school that he's attending, this sort of like continuation program that's kind of outside of the public school system, or outside of the public high school system. And he starts following him to school, and he gets Bruce to teach him. And for Bruce to decide that he's going to become a teacher at that particular point, he had it in his mind, like, oh yeah, maybe he's telling his friends in Hong Kong, when he's exiled to the US, oh yeah, I'm gonna open up all these schools. And people are like, ha, you haven't even learned that much, Wing Chun, like, what are you going to teach people? But at that point, he realizes that he actually has this thing that he wants to share, and that it can change people's lives. And in turn, those people change his life. So Jesse is his first student, and he learns how to see the world through Jesse's eyes. And then he begins to meet Japanese Americans, like his best friend Taki Kimura. And Taki, is somebody who at the age of 18, when he was 18, just before he's graduating and going on to get an engineering degree in college, they are taken away to the incarceration camps for being Japanese American in 1942. And he's held this his entire life. And Bruce, what Bruce brings to his life is this new way of being able to look at the world with pride. Taki often says that Bruce gave him his life back in a lot of ways. And again, so Bruce is teaching them martial arts, but he's also learning very deeply what it means to go through these struggles. He's also learning from a lot of poor white folks about how they live, and how they are trying to make it in society as well. He teaches a lot of folks there as well. And in that sense, he becomes somebody who's open to everybody and sees his mission as being able to, at that particular time, as being able to help to lift them up. And it leads to friendships with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and then of course him getting on screen and playing these roles of the underdog, who has to overcome like forces far beyond anybody's comprehension to sort of make a way to rebel.
Mm. Yeah, and I know through my own experience of doing biography of someone who's long passed, that in doing the research and doing the writing, they really come alive in a way that you almost forget they're going to die. Like, the ending.
Yeah.
And, I think Linda wrote towards she had written, like, how could a man this alive die? And that's definitely how I felt just through the research. I wonder, just for you, through your research, did you kind of lose sight of, like, oh my God, like 1973 is coming, he's going to pass away soon. Like, I can't.
I did. And, and in the process of doing it, of course, you're still speaking to surviving members of the family. And so it's there, but then to move through all of this and to be trying to recreate all of their vivacity and the power that the chi that they, brought and exuded in their bodies and all around them, to the world. You get to a point, right, where you're just like, oh no, I have to write this portion of the book. I'm sure you had that.
Big time.
Right? I'm sure you had that. Yeah. And you're like, gosh, how, like, and then, as a writer, you get overcome with emotion. You just like, wow, like you begin to really understand through that way, like, what the depth of the loss is. Like, we're never going to understand that, like, Pre's family and friends did, and like Shannon and Linda and Bruce's closest friends did. But just approximating that feels very much some kind of a way. You have to be there.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know you had to do that. Yeah.
Yeah. And with books like this too, it's sometimes their premature death can really overshadow their life. And I think what you've done with this book is really, you forefronted his life. So his death is this tragedy, but it's not this thing that you remember him for. And so you give him his life back in a way that sometimes maybe other tellings don't.
And I think you do that as well with Pre. I mean, it's the type of thing where, like the macabre nature of it, right? The Jimi Hendrix, Kurt Cobain, Jim Morrison, Janis Joplin, macabre sort of Tupac, Biggie version of it can be like something that, one dwells upon as a way of coping, I think, as a way of being able to be like, wow, that, person actually, even though I didn't know them, really meant a lot to me. When Joe Strummer passed, I cried. You know what I mean? I was like, no, Joe died?
Yeah.
He was supposed to age and live on forever and become like Woody Guthrie, right? And just be like the guy that was like going to be there at 80, like talking down Trump. But no, he dies, right? At an age, that was way premature, even though he died in his 50s. And so, yeah, to be able to go back, to get away from that and to turn the focus back from the premature death to how he really lived. That's partly what we can do, I guess, as biographers, as folks who can bring life and meaning, the meaning back to folks.
Yeah. And how did you keep from being overwhelmed by the totality of your subject?
one step at a time. Yeah. And like I said, I'm a tortoise. I'm not the fastest hare on the track. I took a really long time with it. So I had time to kind of, walk through it and build and learn. And again, to be able to do it with the patience of of his family and friends, with me. And when I say patience, I mean like I would do an interview and then I go back and be like, you said this, can I ask you more questions about that? And people unfailingly being generous enough to be like, yeah, sure. Like I'll take another hour. Like, like, let me just put down my sandwich here for a second. You know what I mean? Like that, that was, that was part of the process. It's also a joyful part of that process as well, right? And amidst all of the heaviness of what it is that you're doing. Yeah.
Oh, for sure. And did you feel like this book? This is what I'm hearing from Seth Wickersham's new book coming out, American Kings, the biography of the quarterback. A lot of people who've been saying nice things about it were like, this is the book Seth was like born to write. And do you feel in some ways that the Water Mirror Echo, like this is the book you were born to write?
I don't know. I mean, that's something that other people put on you, right? Like you always, as a writer, are always feeling like, oh, I'm born to write the next book that's coming. Like, just wait for that one.
Yeah.
I felt like I was born to write Can't Stop, Won't Stop. I felt like I was born to write, We Gonna Be All Right and Who We Be. So it's an honor. It's a nice thing if folks are saying that, about the book. I'm happy for that. But we keep on moving too. We're not, again, I'm not the fastest person on the track, but I'm still moving.
I know. Like,
I got a few more laps left in me, hopefully.
Yeah. So, like Tom Brady always said, like, what's your favorite championship? He's like, the next one. And
exactly.
I kind of feel like that. I feel like with us, it's like, it's like, I'm born to write all the books I'm meant to write. That's
all the books, right?
And to get to the next one.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, Jeff, this is just so great. The book is a masterpiece, and
thank you, brother. I so appreciate that. Your book is amazing too, man. I can't wait to finish it and just like really be in the thick of it all and stuff. And then I'll come back and interview you and ask you a million questions about your process and about pre.
Well, any day, Jeff. And I love bringing these conversations down for a full landing by just asking the guest, you in this case, for a recommendation for the listeners out there. Just anything that you find cool and making you happy. So I just extend that to you as we wind down.
Anything that's cool or making me happy, man. I mean, there's a lot of things, the family and being able to have some time with them and that kind of thing, being back in the writing life full time. I came back to it about, actually a little bit more than 2 years ago now. And it's beautiful. It's amazing. It's the hardest thing, right? Like it's the hardest thing to do in life, but it's also the most rewarding thing to do in life. So I'm feeling blessed for that.
Fantastic. Well, Jeff, awesome. Just so great to have this conversation. I'm psyched for this book to get out in the world and to make an impact and inspire people. And just it's a testament to your love of the subject and your just masterfully told and beautifully written. So just thank you for the work and thanks for coming on the show to talk some shop.
Thank you so much for the invitation and for this really fun conversation, man. I really, really appreciate it.
Yes. That was great. Thanks to Jeff for coming on the show. It'll be interesting to have him back in between. I love talking to people between books when when we don't have to talk about the thing that we have to be talking about. We can just kind of riff. Those are my favorites, and I think he'll be a great one. Hope it was worth your time. I know it was worth mine. I hope we were good company. I think we were. Water Mirror Echo, Bruce Lee in the Making of Asian America is the name of the book. Mariner Books, woohoo, is the publisher. Be sure you're clued into Pitch Club and Rage Against the Algorithm, my 2 newsletters, to stay in the loop. Secondarily, at Creative Nonfiction Podcast on Instagram. That's where I primarily hang out in the social media, toxic cesspool, shitstorm, hurricane of bullshit. Listen, I'm not one to begrudge anybody making a buck, okay? Especially writers and especially freelance journalists. But I find so much of the paywalling of stuff from writers looking to dish that great advice alarmingly dismaying. So this gets into this idea of gatekeeping versus getting paid maybe what you deserve for a service. I think about this a lot. Let's take a little bit of a detour, but it makes sense. I have a niece who plays soccer in college now, and she's a fine little player. Growing up, she was, like many young girls, soccer obsessed, skilled, and quick. She works hard at it, and I believe it's paid off to some extent. But here's the thing. She benefited from a stay-at-home mother who could drive her all over the Mid-Atlantic to showcases and tournaments and club teams. all the extracurricular playing time and coaching that is the purview of the privileged. She comes from money. And a few summers ago, she was on a travel team that got to play in Sweden. Needless to say, that was not cheap. I think you see where I'm going with this. How many talented, worthy, hardworking athletes on merit alone are or were every bit as good as my niece, but because they might come from, say, a dual income home of overworked parents, they can't join these club teams. They can't be driven all over the state or the region, let alone affording to travel abroad for what was essentially a glorified showcase. We're seeing this in baseball too. Will Baumgartner's book, Homestand, talks about this a bit as well. It's very pay to play. So the people who make it aren't necessarily the best, but the ones with the most resources to manifest their talents. Imagine if all the talent got the benefit from this attention, if the playing field were more level. And make no mistake, it isn't. And it's becoming more lopsided by the day. And so I see it in the writing world too, right? Like how many brilliant voices are going unheard or uncultivated because, I don't know, they can't afford a residency or a workshop and certainly an MFA. You know, these status symbols that give its alums a leg up perhaps. And some people might argue that if you have skin in the game, you take it more seriously. You know, maybe you pay for something, be like, oh yeah. If it's free, it's easy to ignore. But if you pay into it, it's like, okay, now your feet are being held to the fire. You want to get an ROI. But when I see on Substack a lot, I see a lot of these kind of these writer guru types, maybe we'll call them that. You know, paywalling their best counsel. I often bristle at that. I mean, why not give it away? Their platforms are robust enough that they can leverage that to get money from deep-pocketed publishers or their university geeks. Maybe it helps them get tenure or whatever. I don't know. Speaking out of my ass when it comes to university stuff. I'm an outside the academy guy. You know that. There are ways you can still get paid without like nickel and diming your audience, the most privileged of your audience. Well, some of you might say, well, B.O., don't you have Patreon? How is that any different? And to that, I'd say, yeah, it's more of a tip jar. And none of my content is paywalled. And I do offer actual like face-to-face time with the 3 upper tiers in Patreon, which is an incredible bonus. It really is. Like when you really break it down dollar-wise, it's obscene. As many of the patrons know, I often go above and beyond their tiers, and most are just happy to contribute a few bucks, to which I am extremely grateful. Very few take me up on my offers. I often feel bad that I'm taking money and only giving you the thing that you can get for free anyway. So as a result of that, I try to go above and beyond. But often people are just like, we don't give a shit. Just like, keep doing what you're doing. To which I say, awesome, thank you. And I think of Pitch Club and how I'll never paywall it, even though it's worth money. Even though Leah Satilli, my friend and freelancer, Substacker, just good all-around good pal. She's just like, you basically told her audience, like, this is something you should be paying for. Down the road, I may accept pledges. I get more of a tip jar deal. Like, I don't want to gatekeep. I don't want someone, perhaps an upstart freelancer, or someone in college, or a freelancer with very little disposable income, because, my gosh, by the time the tax man is done with your shit, $100 check turns into $40. Yeah. I don't want anybody like that getting priced out of a learning experience that might actually help them make a go of it. And then if you get tremendous value of it, then if the pledges are on, maybe you can kick it back, or you just pay it forward with this new experience you're getting. But Pitch Club takes a lot of time. And if I put up a paywall, shouldn't I try to get what I'm worth? I mean, that's the central tension of doing this kind of work. Much of the work we do is for free. It's to maybe get us attention that we can leverage into paying gigs, speaking gigs, writing gigs, maybe teaching gigs. At what point are we bleeding ourselves dry in service of a greater writing community? Shouldn't we get ours? And this becomes a personal decision that you shouldn't take lightly. For me, in my life, at this current moment of relative matrimonial harmony, I'm okay not paywalling my newsletters or podcast. I'm never going to, but I can see if my financial situation were different and be like, okay, like I need to scrap together income in any way possible. But thankfully, I can leave those things for free for people. But if I can get 10,000 email subs across, be it maybe just in combination the podcast and Pitch Club and Rage Against the Algorithm, I could get just about any publisher to get me a book contract for my lane, which is primarily biography and sports biography more specifically. That to me is currency. Email permission is currency. So by you trusting me with your email address, of which I will never exploit, my attractiveness to publishers grows, and that's how I can get paid. That's kind of my vision, my strategy, my long-term vision for all of this. Also, if I'm giving away 99% of my shit for free, I also expect every 5 years or so that you in the audience, be it on the newsletters or the podcast, will buy my books. Multiple copies for you and your friends. I think that's fair to ask. This line of work shouldn't only be the playing field for the privileged. It shouldn't be pay to play or pay to learn or pay to write. It kind of pains me to think of all the languishing talent out there, be it athletic or artistic, who just need some help. Someone to turn the light on. Someone to light the path a bit. Because my God, that's why I started Pitch Club. Like this thing, the path before me was dark. And I didn't know anything. Just needed someone to just give me some light. So I know I'm going in the right direction. And so this isn't to say it's to spoon feed people, but it's to say, hey, here, this is the way. This is how you can do this. You still have to work at it. You still have to earn it. But the playing field can be leveled somewhat. And the doors shouldn't have deadbolts. So whatever. Stay wild, CNFers. And if you can't do interviews, see ya.